Hello, and welcome to Romance Isn't Dead, episode 28, Wrangling Words. I'm Sally.
And I'm Ray.
How are we doing, Ray?
I don't like winter.
You don't like winter?
No, it's been rainy and cold.
Yes, same. We've gotten some really low temps here in South Carolina, like below freezing, and that doesn't normally happen this early in the year for us. I should say in the season, because it's actually quite late in the year, isn't it? But it normally doesn't happen this early in the season. Normally we don't see those kind of temperatures until like December at the earliest, January. So these are January, February temps for us. So it's very strange, but anyway, it kind of is what it is.
Yeah, I'm literally hugging a radiator. So yeah. It's right down by my side, and I'm hugging it.
We've gotten we're back to more normal temps recently, so we'll see. Hopefully we'll get some. We're forecast to have more snow this year, so maybe that'll keep the bugs in hell where they belong. I don't know.
Yes, I don't think they keep on saying, "Oh, you're going to have snow," but they're forecasting for further north because I live right on the south coast, and to be honest, if we get snow, it turns to ice very quickly and it makes the road conditions horrific. So loads of people say, oh, I really want a white Christmas. I had my white Christmas in 1992 and I don't want another one.
The closest thing I've ever had to a white Christmas, I think, was the day after Christmas. We had snow, and that has been in the last several, like the last 10, 15 years. So, yeah. But I'm good enough. I'm calling that my white Christmas. That's fine.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, my white Christmas, to be fair, I was living in a mountain range village in Austria. So it was bound to be, we had like 16 inches of snow and minus 22 degrees. So it was cold. That's minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius. Or is it Celsius, not Fahrenheit? I never know. But it was cold. But we didn't have a coastal wind. And here, the temperature feels a lot colder because of the coastal breezes we get.
Our temperatures here tend to be a little bit exaggerated as well because of either the wind chill or the heat index. Because our heat index often pumps things up in the most of the year. But, it is what it is.
This is winter.
Yeah.
You think about it, next week we are actually starting December. Is it next Sunday?
Something like that, yeah.
We head right into December, so we are getting very, very close to the winter months to Christmas. Oh God. And of course next week you've got the wonder that is Thanksgiving.
It's my favorite. I love Thanksgiving. All the fun of good food and hanging with the family, although I may have to pick my plate up and leave the room this year. All that fun, but no gift pressure. So that's nice for me because I find gift giving very stressful.
Yeah.
I like to give gifts and I like to receive gifts, of course, but it is to me very stressful because what if they don't like it and I've got to come up with something and I think I'll do a handmade gift, but then again, how much time do I have left? That kind of thing. So
yeah, it's also seeing your bank balance dwindle so much more dramatically than it does at any other point in the year. I think that Christmas does offer an incredible amount of stress. Birthdays, while you're concerned that somebody isn't going to like it, at the same time, you haven't got the pressure of buying 15, 20 presents all in one go, wrapping them all, transporting them all, and then sitting there and hoping that you've got the right Lego set.
Right, because that is going to be opened in front of the entire family. Yes. Oh, I know.
And then you'll have someone say, but I've already got this, or I just bought this for myself.
Yep. That doesn't happen very often in our family, but okay.
It's November, which means that for a multitude, millions probably, of writers across the world, you've all sat down at your computer and gone, "Oh, NaNoWriMo, let's sign up." I know I did. For the fourth time in 4 years, I went to the Nano site in probably early October and went, "No, I'm not going to sign up." How many times did I say to you, "I'm not going to sign up this year"?
I don't want to venture a guess
But
because
how
it
many times did I say it
seemed
after I'd done it last year and failed? How many times did I say to you,
definitely
I'm
not
not
going to
gonna...
do it, definitely not going to do it, definitely not going to do it.
Yeah, and I still signed up. And needless to say, I'm 3 weeks in. Well, it's day 23 of November. We have literally got a week left, and I have written about 13,000 words. None of which they could, I mean, to be honest, I could have literally sat down and written 13,000, 13,000, 13,000, 13,000 times, and it would have made more sense than what I have actually written. So, so writing is a process that loads of people aspire to. I mean, loads. You love writing. I love writing. Probably loads of you listening love writing, but it's stressful. Would you agree?
It is one of the most stressful things that I do or I've done.
And you're
And
a mother.
well, in some ways I kind of hesitate to get too deep in the weeds on this, but at the same time, it's a concern. And did not do Nano. I've never officially signed up for Nano.
You did.
I didn't
You
officially
did
sign
one.
up.
Did
I
you
don't.
not? I thought you did.
I don't think I officially signed up.
Because I was buddies with you the
Were
year before
we?
last. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
the year
You actually
before
finished that
last.
year too, though.
I know. I don't know how I managed it.
You did finish it though. I just have. I mean, I knew coming out of that I could not realistically do it because of all the pressures I have, especially during November. I just can't do it then. And there's never a good, quote unquote, good month for me. But I think I just have to make a priority of it. And maybe that might be our theme. You really have to make a priority of it. But at the same time, you have to be super flexible, right? You found that
Yeah.
this year. So could you talk to me a little bit about that? Like what happened to get you to the point where you're like, crap, I really need to be more flexible. What happened?
Well, I think with me, the problem was I'd sit there and I had a good first few days. I managed
Sure.
my 1600 words plus. You're supposed to write 1667 words per day across 30 days to get to 50,000 words. If you write more than that, then fantastic. If you write less than that, you need to catch up. But it's putting that pressure on.
Mm-hmm.
The problem I have, and a lot of people have, is the minute you start saying, "I've got to do it," all determination just goes,
Yep.
it completely dies a death. And that's what happened with me and has happened for the last couple of years, to be fair. I've sat there and I've gone, I'm super enthusiastic. I've got a really good story. My problem last year was I hugely overplanned it. I had so many ideas. I knew exactly where I wanted to go for the 6 months running up to Nano. I was writing character studies, doing research. I got loads of books out of the library. I was joining various online sites and writing various tester starter paragraphs. You name it, I did it last year. And then I think I managed something ridiculous like 5,000 words before I realized it wasn't going to happen. This year, I've gone down the route of I'm not going to reach 50,000. I know, not even deep down in my heart of hearts, I'm not going to reach 50,000. I know it no matter what. I've reached 13,000 on day 23. It's not going to change. Well, it will change, but it won't change so much that I reach 50. And I've realized that I need to be forgiving of myself. I think my
Sure.
problem at the moment is focus.
Sure. Sure.
So that flexibility comes into play when you think, well, okay, so I can't focus right now. Maybe make a few handwritten notes, see if you can push the story along, maybe create another character that's going to work really well in it, anything that's going to help you when you actually get that determination, that drive, that enthusiasm back. But I
Right.
think Nano's a good thing for a lot of people. It really
Sure.
is. But if you can't write the rest of the year and you literally save it all up for that one 30-day month, are you doing yourself a disservice? I know that I'm doing myself a disservice, but then maybe Nano, even though I've signed up 4 years in a row, isn't for me. Maybe it's for
Mm-hmm.
other people that have that focus that can literally sit down and devote 30 days, especially evenings in the winter, to doing nothing but write.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? The other thing I've noticed is that I actually am a member of a couple of different nano groups, and like on Facebook, and
Yeah.
there is one group, geographically speaking, that's fairly close to me, that they'll have write ins or whatnot. And when I was writing more frequently, I did find that there were some groups around here that I never really got involved in, but I did find there were some groups around here that had, butt in chair, hands on keyboard, fingers on keyboard days. Like, so basically they would get together and do sprints. They
Yeah.
weren't
And we
getting,
found they've worked
yes,
for
yes.
us.
We are able to, if we can find the time together to sit down and just go, we can do things. Like we can do this. But it is tricky. I mean, it really is. I think people don't realize just how difficult it can
Yeah.
be.
That's the thing. I mean, for me, location wise, my closest group is, as I don't drive, which my company find quite amusing. But if because I don't drive, the closest meetings to me are 2 hours away on public
Oh my
transport.
gosh.
Yeah,
That's not
but
feasible.
that's the closest community for me. And I've tried in the past to arrange things a little bit closer, but
Mm-hmm.
it never happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's because there are very few places. I live in a small town that has pubs are open really late, but coffee bars and places where you can meet, and libraries especially, aren't. So when everything shuts at 7 o'clock and you don't finish work until 5:30, you want to go home and eat something before you go out. So meeting outside of that time is really difficult. And you reach that
Absolutely.
point where, which is fair enough, everyone's going, oh, I'm going to the write-in. There's a write-in today, for example, but it's 2 hours away. So that's 2 hours there, 2 hours home, and 3 hours at the write-in. That is 7 hours of my day to get in potentially 3 or 4 thousand words, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So the commitment, you need that kind of commitment as well. I think some of the things that people forget is counties aren't necessarily tiny.
Well, I think counties in the UK are more like some states in the United States. So
Especially when it comes to public transport.
mm, that's tricky. Really
Yeah,
tricky.
so that kind of flexibility doesn't exist
Mm-hmm.
for those who aren't able to make the write-ins. They do these things in chat rooms and stuff, but as we both know, when we do a sprint, the last thing we need is to be chatting to each other. We
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
literally, for the duration of the sprint, don't talk. But the
Mm.
companionship when you're a physical write-in is different.
I've never done that before.
I did a single physical write-in and I actually wrote 5,000 words, and it was the only write-in I managed to organise locally to me. But people
Mm-hmm.
don't seem to be, if they live far enough away from from the local write-in, they don't seem to be bothered about it so much. So
Mm-hmm.
when you try and arrange ones further away, nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what it, I think that's the problem. You need to find a community of writers close to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also maybe sometimes while Nano is great for a lot of people, you need to find the method that works for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it might well be that November is a really bad month for whatever reason. You've got family birthdays. In the UK, we don't have Thanksgiving, so it's not so much of a problem. But you have family events, you've got busy time at work, it's dark, it's cold, it's depressing. Who wants to leave their home after they've got in after a long day at work?
But
That kind of thing.
the flip side of that though is it's dark, it's cold, it's depressing. Why go out? So you can
Yeah,
sit and you can write. So so clearly this is it's tricky, but
yeah.
tell me a little bit about what happened with you this year. What Did you have a change of plot? Is that what happened?
No, it wasn't so much a change of plot, though there was a tiny one, but that was the minute you start writing, things change.
Of
You know that
course.
from writing everything you've written. It was more change in situation at work, at things in my personal life changed
Mm-hmm.
quite a lot. Sort of mid-October, I'd already signed up for Nano, things started to change, and my personal life got a little bit more complicated. Not in a bad, well, I'm saying not in a bad way, it wasn't a great way. And things at work changed, got very, very busy. So loads of stuff is going on. And I get home at quarter to six in the evening, and I'm tired. I literally have reached the point where I'm not a spring chicken any longer. I wish I were. And I get home and I sit on the sofa and I watch a bit of TV and then I go to bed and I'm in bed by 8:30.
Wow.
I know, isn't that sad? But
No, it's just, I mean, I get it.
it's the only warm room in the house. So
I get it. I get it. I get it.
it's warm in there and then I get all cozy and comfy and watch a couple of Bon Appetit videos on YouTube and then I go to sleep listening to the radio and all my drive has just gone, no, you didn't want to write today, really, did you? And I've managed maybe 500 words, mostly on the bus on the way to and from work on my phone, and that's been it.
Hmm.
And then I say to myself, oh, tomorrow I'll do some more. And tomorrow comes and I do exactly the same as I did the day before.
Oh, mercy. Mercy, 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 mercy. Do you think, why do you think that is? Do you think
Um,
you're not particularly enamored of your idea this year? What do you think's
well,
going on?
actually, I really like my idea this year. So I don't think it's the idea. It's just that I had a very bad depressive episode earlier this year, and I think that's affected me more than I realized.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all of those things, because that was only 6 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and so many things happened that I mean shifted my perspective. I really love the idea I've got, and I know that given the time, I will write it possibly. Um, you're talking to the girl who has got probably 10 unfinished novels sitting in a folder, but I will get around to it. I think that this year, maybe every year that I've done Nano, I've sat there and I've put myself under the pressure to write it. And the minute I put the pressure on myself, I don't want to do it. It's kind of like when I used to study.
Mm-hmm.
When I was studying, I didn't want to do it. I'd literally do it to the deadline and submit my essay on the online portal at 10 to midnight when the deadline was midnight. And that would be the point where I'd want to write.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to write when I was working to the deadline on something more important. So I always get the urge to write when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm writing about the latest statistics on reliability of Mercedes Benz. So, and I suddenly have a really good idea and I can't do anything about it.
Except maybe jot it down on a side pad and press on.
Yeah. And press exactly. So you there's that conflict of I need to do my job and I really want to write.
It's called procrastination. But
Oh yes,
anyway,
it is. I'm queen of that. I always have been.
anywho. Well, okay. So you have been successful at Nano before. You have.
Yes,
You know that
I
you
have.
can do it.
I was
Have,
unemployed.
hmm?
I didn't have a job. The year I succeeded, I didn't have a job.
So it was your job, basically.
Yeah, that and searching for a new job, and occasionally I'd be going to interviews and things, but I was unemployed the year that I did Nano successfully, that I completed my 50,000 words. I think I got 50,033 words, but I completed.
No, I've never completed it at all. So, you've written these have been original fics, right? That you're writing
They
your
have.
Nano. Okay. Do you think that that's part of the problem or one of the challenges? Not problem, but do you think that's one of the challenges is that it's an original fic as opposed to a fanfic?
I
What do you
cursed the day
think?
I started writing fanfic.
Okay.
Um,
Do
I
you?
love it. Yeah, because I
Okay.
used to write original. I used to write originals. In fact, I've actually got a completed original that I wrote when I was 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It was 106 typed, large. Uh, that's the thing. We used to have weird paper sizes on the Daisy Wheel printer, and I actually used the Daisy Wheel printer on my manual typewriter, the Daisy Wheel printer paper on my manual typewriter, so it's an odd shape and odd size. But I've got 106 pages, and it's an estimated 75,000 words that I wrote when I was 14, a completed novel,
Mm-hmm.
and it's original.
Mm-hmm.
The day I got into fanfic, my not my creativity, because you still have to have it, but I think my desire to write original stuff kind of dissipated somewhat.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I found it easy to write fanfic.
Okay.
The darker, deeper stuff that I wrote when I really got established in fandoms, that is closer to the original writing than the fluffy, frilly stuff that I write, maybe 2,000 to 5,000 word short stories.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um,
Is that bad?
no, it's just, it is what it is. So, one of the things that you wanted to talk about, how not all writers are angsty or not all things are angsty. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I think the thing that a lot of people associate with writing, you think about writers like Byron and, well, poets really, Byron, Coleridge, Shelley,
Mm-hmm.
they were all, they were emo. Really, they were their era's emo. And you look at the interpretation of a lot of the writers. I mean, Charles Dickens had a lot of comedy in his writing,
Mm-hmm.
but it was also quite dark.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at, I suppose in a way, Stephanie Meyer, Suzanne Collins, all of these authors, a lot of their writing is quite depressive, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not happy joy. It's not like the chick lit that we read. So Jenny Colgan and Jill Mansell, though there was some sadness in there. It was quite happy, and they found their happily ever after, and they found their ideal soulmate and everything else. You read a lot of this stuff, and it's quite dark. And in fact, I look at the forums on Nano this year, and they're writing Regency, horror, science fiction, and it's all pretty dystopian. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that every single writer's a bit angsty.
Mm-hmm.
However, there have also been studies. I did a load of research for a paper that I was editing for a, a medical writer who was doing work on manic depression,
Mm-hmm.
which is now known as bipolar disorder, but back in the 90s it was manic depression. And there was a connection between creativity, like writing specifically, and depression,
Mm-hmm.
that states that many of those who have the ability to write or have the desire to write actually have a depressive disorder of some kind, which I found quite interesting, suffering as I do from a depressive disorder.
Wow, that's interesting. It's very interesting. So, in some ways, then the fluff would be easier to or more difficult to write if you suffer from something like bipolar disorder or something like that. Then that, at least at times.
Well, yeah, because your brain doesn't work that way
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
always.
Right. No, that makes sense. People tend to enjoy the angst, I think. I don't know. It makes for some instant drama. Um, and so
And maybe
that's
people identify with it.
maybe so. Maybe so. Well, I was over here wincing when you were listing the poets because I remember that class in college.
I actually like Byron, and Shelley used to live down here.
Right. And so
Byron did have a few problems. I mean, he was in love with his sister, but he did bring computers into the world in many ways.
right, that's not a story I know. I've always thought about computers as being sort of coming from the mills where
Ada
they
Lovelace.
do what?
Ada Lovelace, who was one of the first computer programmers before we had computers, was Byron's daughter.
Okay. So, sorry. That makes more sense. I was like, wait, what? So, well, okay. So, when we talk about this podcast, really does focus on romance. Hi, romance isn't dead, right? So,
It does.
by its nature, a lot of romance is happily ever after. At least the romance that I prefer is happily ever after. And my husband got snarky, or I got snarky with my husband because we pulled some books out from under our bed or something, and it included a few Kathleen Woodiwiss books, the books that I just haven't gotten rid of and I don't want to get rid of. And he made some comment about my trashy novels. I was like, excuse me, those are female power fantasies, and I will thank you never to call them trashy again. And he was like, how are they not trashy romance novels? I was like, he was like, what do you even mean by female power fantasies? And I was like, are you really serious right now? And I mean, I like kind of went into it with him.
But I do think that a lot of men have an issue with it because maybe it is because of course it is fantasy for women to have a man come in on a white steed, sweep them off their feet, treat them like a queen, and be wonderful to them. And we will be discussing this when we go on when we talk about the book, the Catherine Coulter that we have for next week, because that is definitely a big power play in that particular novel. However, it is that whole fantasy thing for women to have a man. But you think about it, especially modern women today, we are incredibly independent. We are very, very take charge in our own lives, or most of us are. Many of us are still single, such as myself. So we have to do everything for ourselves. There is no man to come in and change the washer on our tap. That would be nice. Anybody want to come and change the washer on my kitchen tap? I will heartily welcome them into my home to do it.
Because cookies, maybe.
Yeah, I am so sick of it dripping. But that kind of thing that's what women want. However, when you think about the chick lit novels, they start with, I mean, one of the ones I read not that long ago basically started with the disaster of her. She was with a boyfriend who clearly wasn't really for her, and she got very drunk with a friend and wrote an email that she didn't intend to send, but sat there and wrote this email about how she didn't like her partner's mother, found her interfering, didn't like working for her, so on and so forth. And to cut story short, it ended up getting sent by somebody else who she'd left her computer open. Her brother brought a friend back for the evening. He was staying at her house and sent this email, and it went to everybody, and her life exploded. Mm-hmm. So it starts with maybe that whole big mistake turns into happy ending. Mm-hmm. So it's not all happy, happy, joy, joy, but at the same time, they're overcoming something. Mm-hmm. So it's a battle that they have, whether it's a physical battle or a mental one or emotional even, to get on with the next phase in their lives. It's almost like they're starting afresh.
But it's not necessarily about being rescued. It is also about being like someone being willing to be what you need them to be. Whether that's being rescued, okay, and that's totally valid, or someone who is a helpmate, someone who views you as a partner as opposed to a subservient, you know what I mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and certainly with historical romances, the idea is hopefully the hero winds up looking at the heroine as a partner as opposed to, you know, Little Woman. Does that
Like
make
Ransom.
sense? Right. So that's one of the things where I think we need to understand too, that people, like when we're reading our romance novels, it's about partnership as opposed to the other.
Ownership.
And it's kind of interesting. I think romance sort of changes through time, but which is why in the 1980s you had a lot of these that today a lot of people find problematic. But that's what, if it makes sense, like historically in the context of the 1980s, where women are trying to knock down the glass ceiling and they're, you know what I mean, there's all the social and societal things happening that you have to take into account when you're reading a romance written in
Yeah.
1984.
I was going to say, a perfect example of that, I think, is the futuristic novels that Joanna Lindsay wrote, where Tedra Da'ar, the main character in her futuristic, the start of the trilogy, is a scientific explorer who ends up going to this planet where the men are in charge and the women are the chattel. And she's very, very independent and doesn't like the idea of being subservient. And then you watch, and then it ties in almost in a way to Working Girl, the movie with Melanie Griffiths that came out about the same time, where she's trying to break through the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
But they all, but I think probably the most famous line from that is, "I've got a mind for business and a body for sin."
Nice.
Yeah, but that is exactly how things were. Men interpreted how you looked as how you were, without taking into account that women were educated, women weren't all stupid. Even if they hadn't had a job before, they'd run a home, they'd raise children, so they'd help them with their homework, they organised the financial budget and all these other things. So there was that independence. It just wasn't so blatant. And these days, we want to be more in charge.
Well, you know what? Have you found, as a Gen Xer, that writing today, do you let modern society conventions maybe
No.
get into? No, you don't. Okay.
I don't. It sounds awful, but I find it makes things far more stilted and unrealistic. I know that we've had the discussion before about the whole consent thing. I think if you need to write it in so blatantly, we read a novel a couple of weeks ago where it was so blatant it felt like it had been literally copied and pasted into the paragraph.
Shoehorned in somehow.
Yeah, it had been. And I don't like that kind of thing because I think it takes you out of the story. Maybe that's a discussion you have at an earlier point in your relationship. What is and isn't acceptable. So it's not a conversation. You're lying in bed about to get it on, and all of a sudden you're having the "Are you saying yes?" conversation.
Fair. I say, see, and for me, I find modern conventions a little paralyzing, and so I find it a little difficult to write because I have a hard time getting it out of my head, and I don't know exactly why, but I do have a hard time getting that stuff out of my head.
Is it maybe because neither of us dated when that was something, while that was something that was happening? If you think about it, I mean, you've been married for...
I'm working on year 13.
Yeah.
And so I got married late.
Yeah.
I would say that is... Yeah. I mean, that could be true.
Because I haven't dated in this century. God, that's sad. But
in this century, wow.
I haven't dated in this century. I know, and we're nearly 20 years in, but I haven't dated in this century. And I think my issue with it is when I was going into clubs and things, we were still in the 1990s. And if somebody touched you in a way you didn't like, you slapped them. You didn't take them to court, you slapped them, told them that that was not acceptable, and then walked away.
Do you think women aren't doing that anymore?
I think, no, well, I read a case in, I was reading the newspaper as you do on the way to work one day, and there was this boy who touched a girl, got something ridiculous. He got a suspended sentence for abuse.
Right.
He hadn't done anything physical to her or anything, but this girl reported it to the police as assault because he touched her. And I think that I really don't like saying this, but I think we're getting too sensitive. We've got to take responsibility for our own actions, and other people have got to take responsibility for their own actions. But when you start saying, well, that person touched me and I want them prosecuted for it, I do think we've got to start taking a step back and saying, really? Should I not have just said, no, I don't like this is not acceptable, don't do it, and walk away? Me.
Right. No. Okay. So I think there's a lot of things at play there that we probably need to unpack. But first of all, I would say, did he brush her arm or did he touch her breast? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
That's a serious question that needs to be addressed there. Secondly, people need to take you're right. People need to take responsibility for their own actions. And I think women now are really pushing for men to take responsibility for their actions. And this actually kind of gets into
A massive.
yeah, but a book the book that we're reading for the next session, we really have to kind of tackle that in that book as well, in terms of why aren't we teaching our sons, or why aren't you teaching your sons? Because
You've got daughters.
I've got daughters. So yeah, I teach my daughters not to be victims, but also at the same time, I have to expect that my fellow moms are teaching their sons not to be predators.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a lot
to
unpack.
So that's an education thing.
There's a lot to unpack in that. So, and maybe this podcast isn't the best place to unpack it, but I think there is a certain amount of, we all need to be responsible for our own actions. And sometimes maybe it feels like it's going a little far in the opposite direction in terms of we're pushing too much responsibility, but I don't know. It's tricky. It's really tricky. But
then people do know right from wrong. I know what's right and I know what's wrong. So ultimately,
most of the time, yes,
you need to take a step back and say, well, is what I want to do right? If the answer is no or not sure, then don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, I really want to take a pen from work. I don't. This is just a hypothetical. I really want to take a pen from work. Does it belong to me? No. Then I don't take it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same kind of thing with, I really like that girl and I want to squeeze her butt. Is she going to like it? Probably not. Then don't do it.
Instead, maybe just go introduce yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Just go and say, hi, can I buy you a drink? Do you want to talk? I really think you're lovely, whatever.
Let's dance.
And yeah, exactly. The same is, in a way, it's kind of what we did in the 90s. Though, admittedly, in the 90s, people did get a bit more touchy-feely. But it is kind of you're rolling your eyes right now, but it's true. They did in the clubs. They'd get a little bit more touchy-feely.
I was in grad school in the 90s, man.
Yeah.
Those are stories I'm not telling my daughters.
Yes. But then you put your own boundaries on it.
Yes.
If
absolutely.
you don't like what somebody's doing, you tell them don't like it, and you move away. Mm-hmm. You don't put yourself in that situation in the first place. You've got to take some responsibility. But ultimately, you can then say, look, I don't like the way this is going. I don't want this, and move away. If the guy then doesn't take any notice of it, then go and report it.
Mm-hmm. I think, too, we also want, again, so much to unpack. I think we also do want to avoid blaming the victim. Again, this is going to come up in the next book. But it's just because blaming the victim infuriates me every darn time. So, and I think part of that is just historical. But anyway, all right, so back to writing. Back to writing. So apparently we've discussed everything but writing here in the last few minutes. But we have been talking about writing because how does society affect what we write, right?
Yes, exactly.
So,
and all of these things, especially when you're writing romance, do come into play because you have to think, am I going to write about? Am I going to write an epic scene about consent? Or am I going to write an epic scene about the mental state of this character that he or she is functional enough to make the right decision or the decision that is right for them. And that's, I think, a lot of that mental state of the writer comes into play a lot. I know that when I didn't take my medication, I was writing far more and far more productively, but everything I wrote was incredibly dark. Let's not go.
Well, I mean, but it was stuff you could use, right?
I used it. I have actually used it. It was incredibly dark, incredibly. The characters went into very, very low places in their own mental state because that's how I was. And I think that your own state of mind is an important influence on what you write. So if you're feeling very, very low and you're about to write a death scene or a murder scene, go for it because you are really going to be able to draw on your own feelings. Not necessarily experience, I hope not experience, but you're going to be able to draw on your own level of emotion at that point. And I think that helps.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do want to say, though, and this is, I guess, only tangentially related, I really do want to emphasize that if you enjoy or find catharsis in reading or writing any kind of fiction, I would encourage you to do it because fiction is a safe place to explore things that you wouldn't do. So if it's stealing the pen from work, right? Fiction is a safe place to steal the pen from work. And
you could have an entire cupboard of them, right. Or you could be like the character in Office Space with the stapler,
right? So don't judge yourself as a writer or as a reader for enjoying a specific element in fiction that you may or may not enjoy or approve of in real life. That's all I'm saying, and as a writer, that's something I need to work on because I'm judging myself by these modern standards and not recognizing that what I'm writing is actually just a safe space to explore maybe the darker part of my psyche or whatever that I think we all need to at least grapple with because it's a shadow within ourselves, and so we probably need to accept that about ourselves.
Yeah.
And so if we are able to, and not to dig into psychological stuff, like I'm not trying to be Robert Bly, but we all do have, sort of a shadow that we need to sort of handle, to deal with. And I think we need to be very kind to ourselves and understand that fiction is a safe space.
Yeah, it's like what you do with your Sims characters. If you're a gamer and you like Sims, for example, and there is somebody at work that you cannot stand, it's far safer to kill them in Sims than it is to kill them in real life.
And I would encourage you not kill them in real life.
Yes, same here.
100% encourage you not to do that. But I would also encourage you not to judge others based on the fiction that they enjoy, especially when they enjoy, enemies to lovers tropes. I'm sorry, I'm getting into my personal, I'm getting judged by... My bad.
I have no judgment on enemies to lovers tropes. In fact, there's a current question, I think it's a current quiz on BuzzFeed that says we can guess the year you were kissed, how old you were when you were first kissed, by your favorite trope genres in romance movies, and enemies to lovers was one of them.
Interesting.
And so was sharing a bed. There's only one bed. That was another one.
There's only one bed. Yes, there was only one bed.
That's the thing. I think that's the thing with writing. You need to spread your wings and try what you feel comfortable with. It may take months and months, if not years, of experimentation to find the genre you want to write in, how you want your characters to develop. Do you want it to be dark? Do you want it to be happy and light and joyful all the time? Do you want a happy ever after, or do you want to write a series? All of those things, they are your personal decision. Don't let them be dictated to by the reviews you've seen for other books that have a similar storyline or plot. It's your story, your plot. Don't plagiarize, though. Really don't plagiarize. But it is your story, your characters, your ideas, and your time. Do it if you want to do it. Honestly, it's probably been the most cathartic thing I've ever done. And I've been writing since I was about 9.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've been chit-chatting here for a while, so we should probably call it a day. Ray, where can people find us on the podcast?
People can find us at Podbean. They can find us now. I'm really, really stuck. romancenotdead.podbean.com. They can also find us on Twitter. Our account is pretty active. In fact, if you're a podcast or you just love romance, we've got quite a few authors following us, which is incredible. And we do get involved in the chats on there. There are some really fun podcasts to follow as well. And we're at ISN Romance on Twitter, which is, as I said, pretty active. I'm at All About Ray, RAYE, on Twitter. And Sally, where can they find you?
I am Palmetto Blue on Twitter and on Instagram. I really don't Instagram much about the podcast. You will, or really even tweet a whole lot. But if you engage with me, I will 100% engage with you on either of those two platforms. And how would we like to sign out today, Ray?
I'd like to say keep on searching for your happily ever after.
And I would remind you, as always, romance isn't dead. It's alive and well on your bookshelf. Bye.
Bye.